Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Tanya Vanpraseuth. Tanya is the daughter of immigrant parents who were refugees. Her parents encouraged and supported Tanya in her education pursuits. She studied at the University of the Fraser Valley and earned a BA degree. She now works at UFV and volunteers at various nonprofits, including Room to Read. It's a great pleasure to have you with me today, Tanya.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
Your parents were born in Laos and were refugees in Thailand before immigrating to Canada. What was your experience like growing up in Canada?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, backtracking to their experience, my parents are ethnically Chinese. So, their parents, my grandparents, were originally from China. Then they moved to Laos, where my parents were born in Vientiane. And during the time of around the Civil War and also around the time of the Vietnam War that affected a lot of the surrounding countries. My parents' country was affected, and then they became communist, the country, and so their families both fled during a time where many people fled Laos. I'm not sure about all the facts, but I've heard that that was one of the, or if not the most large exit of citizens in Laos at that time. And my parents fortunately found refuge in Thailand. So they stayed there as refugees for a really long time, around the 70s. They were quite young, they were kids slash middle school age when they were there. And while they were there, they were fortunate to have a lot of their family members with them, but this really took a toll on their education, and there were a lack of resources. They had to sleep on, I think, like bamboo beds, and they had to share washrooms with other families. There were tons of people in the camps. They had to share food, and there was also not a lot to do, and they really lost a lot of years of their education, and they were just waiting to be accepted into a country accepting refugees so they could immigrate there. And fortunately, at that time, Canada was actually welcoming a lot of refugees. And my aunt actually went there first in my mom's family, I believe, just to kind of see how the country was. And keep in mind, Canada was a very new country back in the day. So refugees at that time, a lot of people were trying to get to England or France or the US because those were more well-known countries. And Canada wasn't well known, so they weren't sure if they were going into another country that also might have had a war or might have not been good for them. So my aunt tried it out, and then she found sponsors for my my mom's side of the family. And so my mom came, and my dad and my mom came around the same time in 1980, but they had previously been friends a little bit, like in the refugee camp, so they knew each other before they came here. They're actually like high school sweethearts, actually. So they've known each other for a very long time,
That's
um
nice.
and went through a lot together. And then they my mom came actually my mom crossed the a river to Thailand, actually, through a boat, but my dad actually went with like a canoe. And actually what's interesting is that he was actually, I think, stuck in a forest somewhere, and then he said that when he woke up there were soldiers that pointed like I think military rifles at him, and he likes to say till this day that he was the bravest amongst the family and he was not scared. But then he actually went into a boat, and then a lot of the people there, they were kind of locked underneath the boat in kind of like restricted area. But yeah, so long story short, they ended up in Canada, and it was a difficult experience. It was such a big culture shock. There was a lot of language barriers. And because they lost all those years of their education, they weren't in school for such a long time when they came back
Mm.
I mean, when they first came to here and started school again, it was so hard, and everything was so different for them. And the language barrier was so difficult, and just the entire culture, and just being so young and in such a new country. And a lot of the reasons why they couldn't go to college was because it was difficult for them to study, and also the financial burdens of it too. When you come here, you don't come with a lot, and they had to start working very early on. So when they had me, they worked so hard to provide for me. And one of the things that they really wished that they did was that they went to get a post-secondary education and that they studied more. And that was one of the things that they wished that they did more. And I really saw how they struggled throughout my childhood with the language barrier, with sometimes being treated differently or spoken differently at by some people, like even in public or things like that. Like you can really see the different experiences that they had because they were refugees, because they're immigrants, because they're people of color, and because they weren't as fluent in their English. And there were a lot of things that really created barriers for them. But they're doing well, and they really work hard, and they're good at what they do. But of course, like things, even reading forms or finding resources, it's 10 times harder because you have that language barrier, and sometimes because people view you differently and speak to you differently whenever you do things. So growing up and seeing that, it did make me sad, but it also made me really proud of my parents for everything that they've been through and how they've always supported me with school. And of course, for me, like having that background that I did, it was very unique, and I couldn't find that many people who related to it, but I could find some that did. And I experienced some things that were similar to my parents, like some people speaking to me differently or treating me differently because of the way I looked, and maybe because of my background, but it's not even in comparison to what they went through. So I always tried so hard when I was growing up to be a good student, because I knew that so many people could not be in my position. And I just got lucky that my family immigrated to Canada and that I had such good, hardworking parents. So I always worked really hard. And even if my parents couldn't exactly help me with schoolwork because of the language barrier, they supported me in so many other ways. They took such good care of me, and they always tried so hard to save up for a college fund, and really encouraged me in everything that I did and gave me so much advice, especially when sometimes I felt like I was unique from other people, and maybe I felt a little lost in that sense when I was younger. So that was my experience.
Your parents struggled with English and due to lack of financial resources and were unable to pursue their own post-secondary education. But they always encouraged and supported you to pursue higher education. You studied at the University of Fraser Valley and earned a BA degree. Please share with us a little bit about your academic journey.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I kind of got into before, my parents were always very encouraging growing up, and they really put the importance on an education, like not only because of financial reasons or career, but because it gives you confidence and it gives you the knowledge to advocate for yourself, and wherever you're going, even if you have a language barrier in another country, you still have those critical thinking skills and that confidence to really, find out answers, find out solutions. Like being in school was so much more than just a career path to my parents, because they know that if you don't have an education, there are so many barriers, and with technology, with finding resources, with speaking to other people, with different opportunities in life. And that was just so important to me. And that's why when I came to UFV, I thought it was very important for me to get a well-rounded education. So I studied different things, and I was in your class, and I learned a lot from you and from different professors in School of Business, and in arts as well. So I really, at first, didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into marketing, and then I worked in the industry for a while, and I had a good time, but then I felt as if I really needed to transition to something else that I was very passionate in. And I always loved my experience at UIV and in adult education. And I thought that it would be such a good opportunity to come back here and to work here amongst faculty and students, be able to make an impact and to continue learning. So now I actually take some continuing education classes and in management skills. And, I plan to learn more. I want to learn more about technology. I want to learn more about research, about adult education, about different things like that. So I couldn't have done it without my parents' support throughout my life, and in their encouraging me to really find my path. They never forced me to study a particular field. They always exercised the importance of going to university, but however I chose to have that journey was really up to me, and I felt really liberated in that, and I never felt stifled or controlled by anybody else. And for them to give me that freedom and that support was really important.
You volunteer for Room to Read in Vancouver, a nonprofit that supports, advocates, and provides resources and support for children literacy and girls' education. Please share why volunteering for this organization is important to you.
I originally found out about this organization through an old high school teacher who told me this organization focused on literacy and providing resources for literacy for kids and for parents with kids, and to also provide education and mentorship for kids, and especially girls in developing countries. And when I found out that they actually had a really huge focus in Laos, which is where my parents were born, I felt really, really connected. And I really wanted to help out with that and help the different countries that had similar experiences. So it was so important for me to be able to use my education and my opportunities to be able to help them. And what they do is great. And it was such a good experience to work with the people here and to also meet the office in Laos too.
You recently visited your parents' home country, Laos. Please share what it was like to visit there with your parents.
Yeah, so going off of the what I said about visiting the Laos office, that was a really great experience, and I love meeting people that focus so hard on really transforming literacy and education in the country, which they've improved so much and provided so many more opportunities, especially for young kids and girls, since the time that my parents left. And it was just so moving to see. And I loved being able to visit the office with my parents as well, and tell my family who was also with me. Some of them actually had the same experience. So my mom's sister and her brother-in-law came, and they were also refugees and immigrants. So telling them that Laos has really improved their literacy and academic opportunities, and that made them so happy. And just in general, on a personal note, I love being able to visit my mom's street that she grew up on. I love being able to visit the different areas that they used to visit, and just seeing things that I didn't see last time that I went. So last time we went to my dad's old village, we met some of his old neighbors, and we saw my mom's old place. But this time, because we did that, we tried to have a more deeper experience. So we try to walk the streets that my mom would walk as a child. And this time, instead of just taking photos, I actually decided to document the experience. And little things like my dad telling me this is the soccer field that I played on, or he found a rainbow fish that he hadn't seen in years that he used to want to play with as a kid, like he loved to look at those. And my mom was able to find a dessert that she hadn't had for like 30 years. So things like that I didn't even know. My uncle told me he used to drive a truck for Pepsi, and it was so cool because I actually caught that as we were moving past, as my uncle said that, and I got to see that truck go by. And it was just so incredible to hear about all their stories and see where they came from. They weren't as fortunate before. They would have to share one house with many, many siblings, and their parents had to work so hard in a restaurant, working so hard and possibly even multiple jobs. And just seeing now the homes there and some of the struggles that people there have to go through, and talking to those people that knew my parents, and just seeing everything that people had to work so hard for there, like 10 times harder than I would ever have to work for here. And it was just so moving to see how far my family's gone. And it's made me just so appreciative of the fact that I'm able to be sitting here and talking to you about this, rather than actually going through what my parents did, and that I'm able to be in this UFE community.
While you were in Laos, you also visited Room to Read's Laos office. Please share what that experience was like.
It was a really good experience to be able to, again, learn about everything that they're working towards with literacy and providing all these resources for people that may not have been able to get that without their help. And it was just so moving because it was the country that my parents were from. And it really inspired me to take action on my own, and not only just with Room to Read Vancouver's office, but with other things that I'm working on. And that really inspired me to think about, what do I see a need for? Because they were saying that they focused on what they specifically thought Laos needed, not just, what globally people needed. They had a really huge focus on that, and they did a lot of research, which, David, I'm sure you would really appreciate that research. If you saw it, it was very extensive research. It was great. So I came back here and I thought, what can I kind of do to make a difference, not just for Room to Read, and not just for a specific nonprofit group. And I thought that I could use my marketing skills to take some photos and use photography to really provide that for nonprofits. And I think my experience with them just really inspired me to take action of my own when I came back. So I'm trying to launch a volunteer photography type of service that I haven't completely launched it yet, but I've helped with some other nonprofits, and I want to do that, and I want to get out there in the local Fraser Valley area and really make an impact on my own. And whether it's pictures that people can use for promoting literacy or promoting their nonprofit or promoting arts and culture, that's just what was really inspiring about my experience there, seeing other people making an impact and finding a need.
What is your message to people who are going through what you went through?
Yeah, I feel like that's such an important question, and it's really something that I really thought of when you sent over to me, and then I really came up with the conclusion that there is no solid answer for that. And all I want to say is that everybody has a unique experience. For people who have a different cultural background or various cultural backgrounds and grew up in Canada, I can relate to you and we can find some common ground. For children of immigrants, children of refugees, I feel like we can all kind of have a similar experience, but it's also so different. So all I want to say is, your experiences are valid and your cultures are valid, and everything that you went through brought you to who you are today. And there's no real answer. Sometimes you will struggle, and sometimes you will find accomplishments. Sometimes you'll feel like you're so fortunate to be here, and sometimes you'll feel like you have so much riding against you because you might feel different or lost. And what I say is that your experience is valid. Everybody's experience is different. And it's really important to find a support system. If you have a good family, great. And if not, find some friends who may share experiences with you. And even if they don't, find people that will support you and see you as who you are. Because growing up, I always felt like I had different identities, and I felt like I was not enough of this and I was too much of this. I didn't know who I was supposed to be, and I thought that I had to follow a guideline that I might see in the media or that other people are doing. And as I grew older, I realized there is no answer. I can really hone in different culturally. Grew up knowing Thai and Laos culture too, and I love their food. And of course, I was born in Canada, so I'm used to the Western holidays and media, and that's totally fine. And it's all about finding the people that accept you as who you are, because there may be others that don't understand you and don't really get why you're the way that you are. And that's fine as long as you have the people in your life that do. And also finding something that you can really identify with. If unfortunately you can't find a support system or you live far away from the support system, find something that you're passionate with that you can really channel your identity and your energy and your culture into. If it's volunteer work, if it's your professional career, if it's person really makes you feel passionate and feels like you can really find yourself and help others as well. And every experience is valid. So I think that's my advice for people, that there's no true answer. It's just about finding your own path and feeling okay about it.
Thank you for your time and sharing your story, Tanya. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you to you too. I look forward to seeing more of your videos.